All right. There's a story that is told of the former president of Israel. His name was Zalman Shazar, maybe the 70s. Um, his name was Zalman, Shneir Zalman. He's a descendant from Chabad Hasidim. And eventually he rose to become the president of Israel. And he was very close with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He would periodically, on his trips to New York, he would visit with the Rebbe. There are many stories that relate to such visits, the political shenanigans that went on until he was able to come to visit with the Rebbe. Just a side story. One of the times the security detail said that it's safer if the Rebbe comes to his hotel in Manhattan, better than him going to visit the Rebbe at his office in Brooklyn because of the security issues. But Zalman Shazar knew better than that, knew better than to request the Rebbe to come visit him, and so he insisted on going to the Rebbe, of course. And when he came to Crown Heights to be in Brooklyn by the Lubavitcher Rebbe for his private audience, the Rebbe said that the decision that you had to come here was correct because at this desk, thousands of Jews come here to cry. At this desk, thousands of Jewish prayers are answered and joys are brought to their life. And this is a very, essentially, it's a holy place. So it's not just about two people encountering one another, which it's also that, but it's much deeper and much more profound than that. Some say that the Rebbe told him that at this desk, every soul enters into the world and leaves the world through this place. Anyway, the point is that he was very close to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And at one point, he was invited to give a talk at a Hasidic gathering in Kfar Chabad, in the village in Israel, for the holiday of Yud Tes Kislev, the 19th day of Kislev. And the Rebbe sent him a letter thanking him for going to this meeting. And the Rebbe explained to him what it is that Hasidism is all about. And he said that you should know that Hasidus is similar to the invention of the modern day light bulb. He said like this, that the electrical force is one of the hidden forces of nature, and it cannot be perceived by any of the five senses. Right? For example, you can turn on the radio right here in this room, but you don't feel the electrical current or the radio currents going through the ear. There's something here. We know that it's in the ear, but you don't feel it. You don't touch it. You can't, with any of the five senses, you cannot connect to this energy that is coming through. We know of its existence only through its causation and effects, only because, and through the fact that we have capabilities of capturing that current, do we know that it exists. If we didn't have that capability, we wouldn't know that it's even here. Why? Because it's hidden force of this electrical current. This hidden force most potently banishes darkness and illuminates the light. When we are able to tap into this electrical current, we can take that area which was at one point dark and illuminate it and make it light. And he says, thus, the electricity is a physical analog for the spiritual force of Hasidism, where the hidden elements of the Torah and its most arcane secrets are revealed via Hasidic teachings and the Hasidic way of life. Through the study of this deep teachings, we can banish the darkness of the material world and illuminate the murkiness of this physical existence. In other words, we have the potential, us, right here in this class, to be able to tap into the energy that already exists in the world, and by tapping into it, we could reveal the godly light or the holy energy that is already here and simply reveal it. Right now, it is covered over and we don't see it, but through our efforts and gifts that God had bestowed upon us, we could reveal it and elevate it. This idea was paramount in the teachings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, not only in his teachings, but also in his interactions with anybody that came to visit him. The Rebbe saw a person for who they were, plus for the potential that they had within them. The Rebbe saw them as they were standing in front of him or writing a letter to him, but he also read between the lines and saw the potential that each and every person has. How did the Rebbe come to view each person in that manner? Because this is really the essence of what Chassidus brings to the world. It brings to the world this idea that all we have to do is dig a little bit deeper and we will reveal a hidden godliness that is already there, and now we are simply exposing it and bringing it to the forefront. And by doing so, we actually are also tapping into a much deeper, more profound element of God and revealing a more essential aspect of Hashem. One of the purposes of constructing a house of God, or in the times of known as the Holy Temple, or in the times of the journey that the Jewish people took in the desert, they built what is known as the Mishkan, the tabernacle, is that they built it using beams of acacia wood. They made these beams. The Hebrew word for the beams are called a keresh, a beam. It has 3 Hebrew letters, kuf, resh, shin, keresh. The purpose of building this home for God, similar to the home that we build here in our own synagogue, that we build this home for God, and the home that we build in our own personal homes, and even more specific, us ourselves, we build a home, a dwelling place for God by building these beams, pillars inside of us, making ourselves strong with these karushim, with these beams. Kufreshin, which is a play on the word for sheker, shin kufresh, which means falseness. So the same letters that spell out the word beam, keresh, kuf, reshin, also has the letters of sheker, which means a lie or falsehood. So we take the lie that exists in the world and we transform it to be a pillar for God. A pillar for the home where God can dwell inside. Taking these 3 letters a little bit further, we can further twist these 3 letters around, and we can spell out the word kesher, kuf, shin, resh, the same 3 letters. And now we have kesher, which means knot, or connection, or bond. So we take that which was once a lie, falsehood. We build a beam, a structure, a solid home for Hashem, for God. And through this, we connect. We make a strong bond, a strong knot with us and God. This essentially is what a chassid is about. What are we trying to accomplish today in our life? We want to be what Silicon Valley calls a disruptor. We want to disrupt that which we think is the norm and show what is really the norm. And what is really the norm? The norm is really the ability for us to change. We wake up every morning and we may think that this is who we are. Comes the teachings of the Torah and says, no, this is who you are right now, but you have so much more inside of you. You have a much greater potential. And therefore, don't be content with your current situation, because you can really reach a much higher state of spiritual being. You can reach a much deeper state of loving someone else, of caring for someone else, of taking care of someone else. So when you wake up in the morning and you say, what am I doing today? We all of a sudden have this list. I can help this person. I can go to this place. I can go do this. I can do that. And that is what we essentially are trying to accomplish every single day. We say, what could I do to make a bigger difference? And how can I tap into even a deeper source of energy that we have? And this comes about not because we are something so unbelievable, amazing. It is because we are attached to the Creator, whom possesses an infinite power. We are part of this infinite God. And just like Hashem is infinite, so too also we have within us these same powers that are dormant deep, deep inside of us, and we always have the power to expose it and express it and bring it to the forefront. But if we say that God is infinite, then how do we have a world that is finite? This world seems to be pretty limited, pretty boxed in, maybe big, maybe very big, it may be super large, but it still has a measurable limit to it. And if this is part of God, then God is not infinite. God has a limitation. And this contradicts what we say every single morning. We wake up in the morning, and one of the first prayers that we say is Atahu ad shaloi nivra ha'olam v'atahu achash nivra ha'olam. It is you, the same you from before the world was created, and it is also the same you after the world was created. There is another verse that says, Ani havaya loishnisi, I, God, do not change, King David tells us. If you don't change, so how's it possible then that we have a limited existence? And how's it possible that if we are connected to God, we, each of us, are very limited? I only weigh so much. I'm only this tall or that big or that small, whatever. So I have a major limitation. And if I am part of God, then God also has this seemingly degree of limitations. And so we're going to talk about today is this idea that not only does God not change, but how is it possible for this limited world to be a part of God if God is infinite and this is finite? We're going to attempt to explain this seeming contradiction or hard to understand idea. One of the great sages of the Talmud, his name is Rav Papa. He lived in Babylonia, and he had heard of the great sages in Jerusalem. And he wanted to go study under these great sages that lived in Jerusalem. In Babylonia, you had two major centers for Torah scholarship. You had a city called Sura, another city called Pumpadissa. These were these great cities with the great Nahardoi. Also, there were several big cities. The great sages of the Talmud lived there and expounded upon the depths of the Torah. But Rav Papa also wanted to go to the Jerusalem sages and learn under them. And the Talmud tells us that he fasted 1,000 fasts. That's a lot of fasts. There's 365 days of the year. To fast 1,000 times, that's a long time. Why did he fast so many times? Because he wanted to forget what he had studied in Babylon in order to empty out his vessel. So when he comes to Jerusalem, he's starting fresh. Now the Talmud and the commentaries ask the obvious question. It's not a completely new teaching. You can study the Jerusalem Talmud and build upon the knowledge that you got from the Babylonian sages. Why do you have to completely forget, empty yourself out in order to study the Jerusalem Talmud? And our Papa himself said that in order for him to truly comprehend the depths of the Jerusalem Talmud, he would need to completely empty out the vessel of the Babylonian Talmud so it should not cloud and interfere with his new teachings. Once he learns the teachings of the Jerusalem Talmud, he can now reintroduce what he learned from the Babylonian sages and merge them together. Sometimes, in order to reach a new height in what we're doing, it does not go in a successive form. It's not one step after the other. Sometimes we have to leap. And that leap is where our Papa was seeking. He said, I want to learn a whole new teaching. It's not a successive step, orderly fashion that one builds upon the other. Many times it is. But if I really want to get the depth of its teachings and maximize what I'm learning, I need to take a leap. Oftentimes, when we look at the world, we try to understand how this world came to being. How is it possible that from an infinite God we have such a finite world? We can ask the question in a similar manner. If you, I don't know how you sleep, if you sleep with your pillow on top of your head or under your head, if your blanket covers your face or not, everyone has different ways of sleeping, right? But imagine you had your blanket over your head and it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon and you open up your eyes and it's dark. Would you say, oh my gosh, the whole world is dark? And not only that, because the cover is over your head, therefore there must be that the sun is not shining today. And if the sun is not shining today, it must be that the light of the sun actually was turned off and the sun has no more light. The proof is because under this blanket, there's no light. Obviously, that's a preposterous thing to say, because by me covering over my head with the blanket does not diminish the light of the sun any way whatsoever. I can take all the shades, cover all the windows of my house. It does not change the fact that the sun's light is still shining. It may not be shining in this room because I have the shades down, but the light is still shining. In other words, the light of the sun is not changed by the way we cover over, don't allow the light to enter into certain places. The light is still shining. Certainly, the sun itself is not impacted. We can say, okay, if the light can shine into 1,000 places and I cover the room, this one room, so now it's only shining in 999 places. So it's not shining in this room. One can perhaps make that argument. But is that diminishing the sun itself? You may be limiting the light of the sun in this one particular place, but you did not change the ray of the light, and you certainly did not change the sun itself. The sun is still in its full force as it was the moment that God created the sun. That does not change. Does this make sense? So based on this, we can now perhaps try to understand how God created this world. He created this world in a way where his light was allowed to shine forth and illuminate the world that we live in. Before the world was created, there was only God. Once the world is created, there is also now a ray of God, a light that is emanating forth from God. This light does not change the source of the light. The light of the sun, the light that comes from the sun, doesn't change the sun at all. The sun still remains in its pristine form, the way it's created. Now, it is not a perfect analogy because the sun by itself has a little limitation. In fact, if we say, Ani Havaylish, I am God who does not change, that itself puts a limitation on God already. Because we're saying that God doesn't change, meaning to say there's a potential to think that God does change. That itself is a limitation of a God. So how do we even think that there's even a possibility that God does change? Therefore, we have to say that God doesn't change. So we need to understand, what does it mean that God doesn't change? It means that it's impossible for God to change. Why is it impossible for God? It's only us, the way we interact with the light, that is changing, but not the essence of the light that changes. If a teacher teaches a class and the student understands what the teacher taught, so now the idea that was once in the head of the teacher now enters into the head of the student. Has the teacher's mind been diminished at all? No, didn't change. Maybe even the teacher's mind, it grew, but that also is a change in the teacher's mind. So that's only an analogy to help us understand how when the student understands it, it doesn't change the teacher. When we have the light of the sun that comes forth, it doesn't change the sun. The light that creates the world doesn't change the source of the light. What is the source of that light? That is God himself. And that light is infinite. And that light doesn't change. Doesn't change before the world is created, doesn't change after the world is created. It is the same God that it was then. It is only now that there's a world that is able to exist. Why? Because before the world was existed, there was so much light that we couldn't handle the intense light. So what did God have to do? He had to actually pull back the light, diminish the intensity, so we could handle this world. Now that we have the world, we realize actually how little light we have of God. How little light we have from God. What does that tell us? That means that there's a potential for so much more light. And that is what we strive for every day. How can we reveal more and more light? We know there's more light in this world. How do we know there's more light in this world? Because the only way this world can exist if God puts a veil over the light, puts a shade over it, and puts some kind of screens to not allow the intense light. Imagine someone shines a flashlight into your eyes. You won't be able to see anything. The only way you can see if you put on sunglasses. Then you could walk outside. Otherwise, the light's too strong. So the light that we have in this world, the whole way God created the world is through diminishing the light, through hiding part of this light. So what do we want to do? We want to reveal the light that is hidden in this world. We want to awaken that sleeping beauty that is beneath the surface. If this is the light of God, this is also the potential that we have inside of us, because we are part of God and we are limited beings only on the surface, only for us to be able to survive. If you do not have a filter from your brain through your mouth, you can get in trouble. And we know people, you all have friends that don't have filters. And sometimes you stay away from those people who don't have any filters. A filter is a healthy thing. We are created with these filters. with these limitations. But that does not mean that's who we are. That doesn't define us. We are so much more than that. And in the terms of Chassidus, there's a yecholet, there's a potential hidden within this light for us to reveal it. So the infinite light then has two aspects. One, there is too much light. Okay? Therefore, the light has to be limited or contracted, as the Kabbalists use tzimtzum. There has to be a contraction of that intense light. But this light also has to fit into a small place, into my small body or my small world that we live in. This immense light has to fit in there. Does this put a limitation on God? No. To the contrary. To the contrary. Even if we say that God can't fit into a limited place, then when we say that God is limited. If we say, this is too small, God can't come there. This is too distant, God can't reach there. This is too high, God can't climb up there. That is putting a limitation on God. So the fact that God is unlimited tells us that God could fit even into the lowest, the smallest, the tiniest places. Which means to say that everywhere in this universe we can find God by tapping into the Risa and revealing it. And this idea is what the Zohar, or Tikkunei Zohar, tells us, that the light from God goes to the depths of the world and reaches the heights of all heights. To go down, 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 yes, we must say that, as we just said, it can fit into the most limited things. If we say it can't, that's putting a limitation on God. Therefore, it must be that it can go everywhere. But also high, high. What does it mean, high? And so when the Lubavitcher Rebbe shared this idea, he shared it on the 10th of Shvat, which is this coming Saturday, which is the anniversary of the day that the Rebbe accepted upon himself the leadership of the Chabad movement. And he shared this discourse based upon the teachings of his father-in-law. This idea specifically this year, or the way the years fall out, so in 2025 or 5785, that Rebbe would have shared this idea that the light of God reaches the height of all heights. Does that mean then, let's go back to the sun analogy, that if the sun has a light that emanates from it, and it goes down, down, down to the furthest corners, and the light does that. You know, as if there was no obstructions, the light would reach everywhere. The only reason why the light doesn't reach anywhere is because something is blocking it. That blocking it doesn't diminish the potential of the light or the power of the light. It just blocks it. As soon as you move it away, the light will go there. But the light of the sun also goes higher than the sun. What does that mean? It goes beyond the sun. Goes above. What does that mean, above the sun? It means deeper into the sun. In other words, the light of the sun is so powerful that it has within it myriads of levels of light within itself. The source of light is who? Is God. If the sun is light, that's so powerful, and you can dig deep, 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 deep down into the recesses and still find even more levels, how much more so with the source of light that gives the sun the power, which is God himself, there is no limit. That's what it means. It goes high, high. It goes so high. Doesn't necessarily mean high in height. It means high in depth. And this idea is what God put us onto this earth to tap into, that we have within us this hidden potential. Don't allow anyone to tell us that we don't have this capability of tapping into a place that is beneath even what we think we have. We have even more than that. So when we wake up every morning, we say, wow, I am going to change two things. I'm going to change myself because I have that potential, and then I'm going to change the world around me also. And I'm going to see this world not necessarily for what it is, but for what it can be. I'm going to dig and reveal the hidden potential inside of everything in this world. And that is the secret of what we could accomplish every single day when we wake up. Okay, let me get to some of these questions here. Well, first it was darkness, but then Hashem wanted us to also know that even when there is darkness, then we can understand light. So the question that we ask when we say in the daily prayer, Yotzer Or U'Vere Cheshach, He formed light and created darkness. Is darkness just the absence of life, of light, or is darkness a creation in itself? So darkness, God created darkness, but even within the darkness, there's light. Darkness is a creation, and He formed light and created darkness. You see the different terms? Forming is a stage after creation. Creation means just a blob. When you form it, you make a some kind of shape to that blob, right? So you have, let's say, a piece of stone, and the sculpture comes and forms a image out of that stone. So creation of darkness, but He formed light. He formed light from the darkness even. So the darkness doesn't mean there's no light. It just means that light is hidden. And He formed the light. He revealed the light through the darkness, which is why we only appreciate the light after it comes from the darkness. If we have so much light, we don't appreciate it when it's dark. And then we have light. Now we have light. We know that mostly when we see that the electricity goes out, right, in one's home, and it's dark all of a sudden. Now you appreciate the light. Oh, now you have light. If you always have light, you don't appreciate it. We turn on the switch, boom, you got light. But when you don't have it now, so that's what it means. Also, just an analogy to understand this concept, because in reality, nothing that we see is real. It's only perception that Hashem wants us to see. Right, so what does it mean that the world is just an optical illusion? And it's all a false perception of reality. It's a real world. I mean, it's tangible. You can touch it. But what we're seeing is only the physical aspect of the materialistic part of it. But when we dig deeper, we see it's actually made up of atoms, let's say, for example, okay? So the atoms really hold things together. If you take apart the plastic or the cup or whatever it is, you reveal that which is holding it together. In other words, every physical thing is really made up of something much deeper than that. You take a microscopic thing and you can see what it's made up of. And that is the light of Hashem that holds everything together. My understanding is that the light of Hashem was the physical light until He made the sun and the moon, but then His light creation kept it going. Right. So when God created the world, before He created the world, there was only God Himself. That light was so intense. The world cannot exist with that light. God therefore contracted that light. Now a world came into being, but it was a world of chaos. It was just light, nothing, no system. So God then created the sun, the moon, the heavens, the earth, created some kind of a system to the madness. Now we look at the world, it still seems pretty mad. But within the madness, there's some kind of system, some kind of logic. And that's the light of Hashem that is there, and it's our job to reveal that light. Thank you very much for joining. We'll see you next week. Any more questions? Yeah.